Thanks, Elise, for that very good introduction. Fortunately for all of you, time is short, so you're going to see as little of me as possible. I'm talking about the Asia angle. As mentioned in the introduction, my name is Jeffrey Kirk. I'm the managing partner of Appleby BVI. Appleby, for those of you who don't know, is an offshore law firm and fiduciary services provider. It's indeed a privilege to be here and to present on and discuss a region that has been so prominent for the past decade. And the fact is that the Asia angle remains crucial for all of us. By way of background, and as Elise mentioned, I relocated to the Appleby BVI office last year in July 2014. For the 5 years preceding that, I was based out of Appleby Hong Kong office and practicing as a corporate and commercial partner there. During my time based in Hong Kong, I served our clients throughout the Asia region, both out of Appleby's Hong Kong and Shanghai offices. My clients were predominantly from diverse Asia geographical and cultural origins, whether mid-cap mining companies based in Western Perth, Australia, real estate investment trusts operating in Vietnam, telecommunications and IT giant based in Japan, Chinese parastatals, and the world's largest banks by market capitalization, again, Chinese banks, South Korean investment managers, Singaporean-based investment banks and private banks, and the Malaysian Sovereign Wealth Fund. And notwithstanding that, I suspect that Russell, who's put together this extraordinary event, is under a misapprehension that I am qualified to talk about Asia. So let's talk about the emerging or emerged Asian tiger. Asia, like all continents, is a vast area with very different interests and perspectives. It really should be examined on a more direct jurisdictional and business sector basis, but time is short and I'm boring. HSBC have just released last month an Asian Economic Research Report, December 2014. Thankfully for me, for the purposes of presenting to you. So these are accurate figures and quite astounding figures. Focusing on the PRC, according to the HSBC report, China's economy now exceeds that of the US in purchasing power parity terms, as Elise noted. China plus emerging Asia is larger than the US and the Eurozone combined. However, in terms of international purchasing power, the US remains the largest economy, producing 22% of world GDP. The Eurozone produces 17% of world GDP, and the PRC 11% GDP. The remarkable economic achievements of China, never before seen in the history of the world, is reflected by the fact that in the year 2000, the US made up 31% of world GDP, and China a mere 4%. But China, although the largest economy in Asia, by no means stands alone. The HSBC report looked at emerging Asia, consisting of Southeast Asia, China, and India. In terms of the figures for that region, 2014 combined dollar GDP for the region was equal to the US GDP for the first time in history. The 2015 growth rates, US is estimated to add 450 billion to global output, China to add 800 billion to global output, and the rest of emerging Asia likely to add twice as much to GDP as the Eurozone. Asia, the region as a whole, is anticipated to add more dollar GDP than the remainder of the world combined, and import demand, which can be regarded as a truer measure of world economic activity than incremental GDP, showed that notwithstanding Asia's import demand is difficult to measure, that's often due to a lack of accurate reporting and transparency. That notwithstanding that, even if halving Asia's projected import demand, it would reveal that China will be well ahead of the US and almost double the Eurozone imports in 2015. I believe that we've all been aware of the developments and growth in Asia, but it's astounding to see the figures nevertheless. On a more practical level, you can see these economic figures translate into reality when you're on the ground in Asia. Whether catching the bullet train from Shanghai to Beijing faster than you can fly, jumping on the maglev train in Shanghai to get to the airport, which travels at close to 500 kilometers an hour, visiting the Marina Bay Sands project in Singapore and the armada of cranes that exists in Singapore, traveling on and witnessing the road and bypass development and infrastructure projects in Jakarta, and seeing the ever-expanding MTR network and building of a new cruise pier terminal in Hong Kong. The pace of change and the development of infrastructure is never ending. Undoubtedly, North Asia is the center of so much of the world's focus. However, neglect the ASEAN tiger at your peril, or more likely at your cost. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations is implementing the ASEAN Economic Community this year, the AEC. This will bring in a single market and production base. It'll allow for free movement of goods, services, investment capital, and skilled labor. It'll facilitate the development of a competition policy, protection of intellectual property, facilitation of e-commerce, and the introduction of comprehensive investment protection and dispute resolution system. All highlight the global increasing importance of ASEAN. However, all is not necessarily as bright as would appear. Asia does face challenges. We've all seen and heard of the rumblings of a slowdown in China, driven by slowing world demand and a potential debt crisis. We have witnessed the pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong, right outside the Appleby office in Central, I would add. In fact, overnight, the Hong Kong chief executive, C.Y. Leung, made his first public address of the new year and posed the immediate suspension of the protests in Hong Kong. And he stated that economic growth needs to take preference over democratic reform. A speech that has not been well received by the Hong Kong pro-democracy sector and has caused scuffles in the legislature. So continue to keep an eye on the Special Administrative Region of Hong Kong and developments therein. Now, Asia's performance as a whole is down on pre-financial crisis levels. There's slowing growth. There's the continuing existence of grinding poverty. Asia has almost 700 million poor, almost 65% of the world's poor, living on less than $1.25 a day. It has rising debt levels. One of the most interesting developments of the past couple of weeks has been the fact that the central Beijing government has relaxed prohibitions to allow 10 local governments to issue municipal bonds. So this is an about turn in terms of the PRC law, which precluded local governments entering into debt. And this reflects the concern the central Beijing government has in terms of local government debt. There is certainly a need for structural reforms. China needs to reduce its state-owned enterprises and to implement privatization. Japan, I think we all know about the demographics and the challenges facing the Japanese, that it needs to deal with the aging population, and it certainly needs to facilitate immigration. And India certainly requires land and labor reforms and measures to cut corruption. Now, whilst I was living in Hong Kong, and I had an analogy that I would often use in describing the Asia and China in particular economic miracle, namely that it was like Dick Whittington and his cat. I would meet with many visiting business people and service providers who are often of the view that the streets of Shanghai, Hong Kong, Singapore, and the cities in Myanmar were paved with gold, just as Dick Whittington believed of fabled London. There are undoubtedly opportunities, but like anywhere, to succeed in growth, it takes time, energy, commitment, intelligence, and understanding. So, what is the relevance of all of this to the BVI? I do not think I'll be raising any eyebrows if I state that Asia is a crucial market to the BVI. Indeed, I'm sure that you've often heard of the fact that in China, offshore is referred to as BVI. I know these, there are the figures that Elise has mentioned early on, and these are from BVI House Asia, and some startling figures. BVI's second largest investor into China, 2006 to 2012, and as Elise mentioned, the fourth largest recipient of FDI from BVI into China. I'm not going to dwell on those figures. I think those are freely available, and they're from BVI House Asia. When I was practicing law in Asia, and I should mention that I was practicing the laws of the BVI, Bermuda, and Cayman, I was constantly surprised at the appetite of BVI vehicles amongst the Asian clients. It wasn't just the BVI corporate vehicles, but also the products available and offered by those vehicles. We would more often than not be dealing in multi-jurisdictional transactions and structurings, whilst there might have been one of Bermuda, Cayman, Jersey, Isle of Man vehicle and structure involved in that. Invariably, there were BVI vehicles. BVI was the one constant in all the deals that we saw. And these structurings and these deals, it could have been a BVI company as the issuer of a bond or a hybrid security, listing of a BVI company operating as a clothing retailer on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, establishing BVI investment holding companies and funds for Middle Eastern investors and South Korean asset managers, having BVI companies directly involved in the financing of alternative energy sources and clean water projects in the People's Republic of China for an Asian Development Bank that was operating out of the Philippines. It's incredible to note the use and the fact that the BVI corporate product appeals to such culturally diverse people for such a myriad of purposes remains an enduring testament to the BVI as a leading financial center. We in the BVI have an established client base in Asia. We need to look after them and ensure that we are at the forefront of their business needs to facilitate Asia's growth and investment into the rest of the world. Thank you.